Hey guys, Toolman Tim here. Welcome back to the workshop where we create community, find freedom, promote preparedness, and share success. It's Sunday night, which means it's time for the workshop podcast live stream of the week. It's November 4th, 2021, and it's episode 32 of the workshop podcast. Sorry, I had a little reverb there. And so, yes, anyway, welcome everybody. And so before we dive in, a couple of quick little pieces of housekeeping to work on. First off, if you're new and you want to know more about who I am, or you want to support the content that I create, the quickest and easiest way is to run by toolmantim.shop. You'll find a whole bunch of gear over there that I've used and abused, stuff that's made me money or saved me money in my handyman business. And all you got to do is go over there, and if you start your Amazon shopping from there, it will help support the content I create, and I will be grateful. So thanks, guys. Number two, we hit 1,000, I hit 1,000 followers over on Float this week. And if you are not over on Float, it is an incredible social media platform. I love the place. It's awesome. So if you have some time, you want to drop by there, it's flote.app, a really, really cool social media platform. It's creator-centric, free speech, and the people who are running it over there, Aaron and Kingsley, are stand-up individuals. Really cool. Stand for freedom, and they're so accessible. It's unbelievable. So if you want to, if anybody needs a new social media platform to check out, run by Float and check them out. Third, I pretty much have Float and Odyssey figured out, although Odyssey just crashed on me here. So I will at least be able to monitor Float chat this evening. So if you're over there watching, thank you guys. And if you're in Odyssey, I will try to get you brought back up. And then finally, this is the best one. Of course, you guys have heard it a little bit already, but this Thursday is the official launch of the Preparedness series. It's still going to be in the regular workshop podcast feed. However, it's also going to be the episode that's going to simulcast over with the Prepper Broadcast Network. And this is going to be an incredible opportunity, guys. It's going to stretch the workshop community. It's going to introduce us to new people. It's going to have new people introduced to our community. And we're going to get to interact with some really cool freedom-minded folk over there. This is the biggest opportunity that's happened yet for the workshop, and I am super excited. So if you guys get a chance to pop over on Thursday evening, it's still going to be here. We're going to try this. We're going to do YouTube, Float, Odyssey, and the audio is going to be live streamed through the Prepper Broadcast Spreaker app. So anyway, all really exciting stuff. And now, so we are here this week. I would say 3-4 weeks ago, someone in the live chat, I wish I'd wrote down who it was, asked if I could do an episode on bugging in versus bugging out. And I thought, hey, this is a great idea. And I had a bunch of interviews lined up. And now we have an evening where we get a chance to chat about it. So anybody have any comments, throw it out there. If you got questions, try to put them in all caps if you want. But, I'll make sure I answer them as we go along, guys. So Tom says, that's cool. Excellent collaborations is where it's at. Ain't that the Truth Lots project? So anyway, tonight we're going to talk about bugging in versus bugging out. What do those terms mean? What is involved in each of them? And I guess the biggest one is, how the hell do we decide whether we're going to bug in or bug out? And how are we going to make the right decision? So when I started putting my notes together tonight, I got thinking, I'm like, there's always these terms in the English language that you hear all the time, like bug out. And you're like, where in the hell did that ever come from? And I mean, you kind of got an idea, but Tom says bugging in. I just got to this farm and dang it, I'm not leaving. Yeah, that's a good concept to have. So I got digging. Anyway, I figured, you know what? Let's look up the actual origin and definition of bug out. And I thought this was kind of cool, but they figure it became popular in the Korean War. They had phrases there called bug out fever and the big bug out. And that was the right around the 1950 retreat in the Korean War. But they figure it also originated in World War II, perhaps based on 1930s cartoons featuring bugs fleeing an impending foot or boot. Ultimately based on the rapid, disorderly flight of bugs when discovered, particularly their scattering, if several are discovered at once. So, you pick up a rock and all of a sudden the ants go in every direction. The traditional concept of bugging out is just like that. A whole bunch of bugs heading in a different direction. Or, if you want to put it in modern terms, every person in a city heading out away from a hurricane at the same time, all with different plans, all heading in a different direction, all looking like a bunch of bugs bugging out. And the biggest thing is most people just don't have a plan. They just want to get the hell out of Dodge, and their only concern is to get out. They're just like, oh my goodness, this Bigfoot just picked this rock up and off, and now I got to get out of here. And then, of course, the whole idea of bugging out kind of had a bad connotation to it because you're an idiot little bug running away. And of course, the prepping community had to co-opt that term, and they gave it a positive meaning. Bugging out as in, doing the right thing and possibly surviving something that could be a bad situation. So the definition of bug out is leaving a situation in a hurry when your chances of staying safe are increased by leaving home instead of staying put. And I thought, hey, that's not too bad. I come up with that one on my own, so I don't want to pat myself on the back. But and then, of course, us preppers, those in the preparedness community, we have to have a term. We have to literally rename everything or come up with a fancy little acronym or term for it. And of course, we had bugging out, and then everybody's like, well, what's the opposite of bugging out? We're going to stay at home. We'll call it bugging in. So that's where that came from. And my definition of bugging in, and I'm sure everybody else has their own definition of what exactly it might be, but my definition is the ability to safely stay at your home location for a prolonged period of time without needing to get supplies or leave your location. So in other words, bugging out is exactly what you do on a normal basis when you're a prepper, when you're into being prepared. So, if you're keeping your shelf stocked, and if you're getting yourself backup sources of heat and backup sources of power, and you have stored water on hand, then honestly, bugging in is just living the normal life that you're already living, just living it through either a small or large disaster. And to be absolutely honest, we all love the idea of bugging out in the woods somewhere or something, but it seems to me, in my, less than professional opinion, that the proper choice, security. I got like 10 pages of notes tonight, never even thought to mention security. So this could end up turning into an ongoing series there, Brian. But I would honestly venture to say that about 95% of the time, not always, but about 95% of the time, the better option is to bug in. Now, some people might get their feelers up and, go all crazy over that. But honestly, we kind of glorify and get excited about the idea of bugging out and going in the woods and doing all this stuff. But most times bugging in is going to be the better of the two options. So what exactly is involved in bugging in or bugging out? Well, honestly, like I said, bugging in, so much simpler for anybody and everybody because you've got all your shit there already. No need to take and pack everything up into Rubbermaid totes or tough boxes or anything like that. No need to make all the hard decisions of, oh, shit, what do I take? What's going to go with me? What's going to stay home? No need to round up all of the valuables, that kind of stuff, because you've already been living that life every single day. Every step you take as a prepper, whether you're new or a seasoned person who's been into preparedness since Y2K, every step you take is, I guess, one more little step in making bugging in that much more comfortable and that much easier, really. And what I love about the idea of staying at home in an emergency, and of course, we will all be able to bug in and bug out all at once. Yeah. Yes, that is true, Brian. I thought about talking, I got a little bit on RVs afterwards, but that whole idea of, living in an RV or having a bug out vehicle, an RV vehicle, is just awesome because you're literally the best of both worlds. You don't have to take anything. About the worst you might have to do is, jack your RV back up, hook it onto your tow vehicle, and along you go. It's the best of both worlds, a little bit smaller. As long as you don't have like really big dogs like Chihuahuas or really little dogs like St. Bernards, you'll be all set. So, but, and that's a perfect example of how much more comfortable you're going to be if you make that choice to stay home. Storing up food, stashing water, backup heating sources, they're all those steps toward bugging in. And of course, if you live in an RV, most of that's going to be there already, which, I love the idea of that. So of course, there always is work involved. And if you decide that, Hey, Mr. Dixon. Very good. Nice to see you, sir. But if you decide you want to bug in, basically everything else is already in place. So the only thing at this point that you have to prepare for is whatever emergency it might be. If it's a snowstorm, well, we might want to make sure that our snow gear is up and ready and accessible. You might want to make sure that your backup power is good. You might want to test your furnace, make sure it's working really well. Let's bring up Tom's here. Living in an RV down by the river. It's a great plan. And Brian does have 3. Yeah, I know. I'm giving him a hard time. But yes, the good old Chris Farley quote there, except a little bit co-opted with living in an RV down by the river, but I love it. But yeah, so, okay. So say, for instance, we got a great big thunderstorm coming, or, a great big thunderstorm with hail. And when it comes down to it, obviously that's not really a reason to bug out. But again, it's an emergency, or at least something that could turn into a bit of an emergency. So obviously, first thing we're going to do is we're going to make sure our blackout kit, our power outage kit is all put together. Batteries are charged. You're all set. Make sure that your generator's up and running, that kind of thing. A lot of times, if I have a day's notice for something like that, I'll haul the generator out, give it a run, make sure everything's working, because there's nothing worse than being, in the middle of bugging in a big storm like that, going to start your generator, and you're like, well, damn it, I haven't started that thing in 14 months, and the gas has been in there since 1984, and it just will not start no matter what you try, because it always seems so much more frustrating when you're dealing with crappy weather, and you know that everybody's counting on you, and all of a sudden it won't start. So take the stress off, make that step ahead of time. Absolutely. Get everything under cover. One thing we do around here, and hail is one of those, kind of bug in things. You don't want to be caught out in it. Pretty rare that we have really, really bad stuff here, but you do get some on occasion. We got, who else dropped it? Hey, Ken, how are you? Mr. Cornelius is here. Nice to see you, sir. That picture, your profile picture is looking rather dapper. But yeah, let's bring up Tom's here. He says, totally agree, Tim. Power outage is the biggest threat here. We have electric heat, so if our grid goes down, we are scrambling. I have a backup generator. Need to make sure everything else is set. Yeah, so and I mean, of course, there's always going to be that middle of the afternoon when the sun's shining, there's no bad weather, and the power goes out, and you're caught with your pants down. Sure. But, 8 times, 9 times out of 10, when we have a really nasty situation like that, we have this thing called the weather forecast, and we can kind of look and see. Sometimes things turn out really quick, and, but again, we always go with the odds, and we always, play the numbers game. And if, of course, there is like a thunderstorm in the works, or a nasty hailstorm, or a power outage, that may end up coming, then yes, haul the generator, get it working. And for us, with the big hailstorms, I have a covered garage. Okay, yeah, obviously a garage is covered by the definition of a garage, but I have a garage I can pull one vehicle in, and the other one, I pull it around as tight as I can to the east side of the garage. Our prevailing winds here almost all summer long, actually all year long, come from the west. And most hail damage is done on the west side, the west-facing side of houses. So if you can get your vehicle and everything behind something easterly facing, at least you can minimize the damage. So again, you go around, you take those steps, and that's really about all you end up needing to do. Snowstorm, we all love snow. Looks like, by the looks of things, just about everybody kind of in the Minnesota area got a little bit of snow in the last couple of days. But, for us, like I said, make sure your backup heating sources are up and running or tested out. Make sure your snow removal gear, that's what I did this afternoon. Went out and made sure my backpack blowers are running good, and couldn't find my push scoops. So I got digging, and I realized, hey, I put them in my new little shed out front earlier this year. So I managed to find them. It's way better to have them ready tonight and not need them tomorrow morning than to need them tomorrow morning and not be able to remember where I put them. And then something we used to do in the East Coast quite often, don't do it too often here just because we don't get the dumpings of snow. But if we have like a 2-foot dumping of snow coming, we would park right at the end of the driveway, so that if we had to get out in an emergency, you didn't have to either shovel 2 feet of snow 150 feet long, or you didn't have to try to back your vehicle down a hill through 2 feet of snow. So again, just being proactive. So and the beauty of bugging in is, everything else is already taken care of. So you can focus on the one, emergency that may or may not be coming. Brian says propane conversion on the generator really clean. Absolute. Yeah. Anyway, there's nothing better than running some sort of natural gas or propane through the generators. So far, I'm going to do some emissions tests on mine, but yeah, propane conversion on a generator, absolutely. Yeah. And then a few little notes I had on the idea of bugging in, and this, and like I said, 95% of the time, we always glorify that, the crazy guy that's going to go live out in the woods or something like that. But bugging in, it takes way less work. You don't have to pack anything. You don't have to do anything. You just get to sit at home and wait out the storm. It doesn't take any extra money, or at least, you don't have to go buy yourself a bug out property in, another country, or a souped up off the grid RV, unless that is home, But yeah, like as far as bugging in, you don't have to go to a hotel. You don't have to book anything. It just costs less. So, hey, it takes minimal planning, because again, the only thing you got to plan for at this point is the actual emergency that you're dealing with. Beyond that, you're like, hey, you know what? We're good. We're just going to keep living life. We're going to eat out of our food stores. We're going to drink our stored water. We're going to make sure our backup power's running, and that's it. Chris says, our town screws us over. They drive down the middle of the streets when we have a dump of snow and block everyone in with a huge windrow of snow. That reminds me of the old skit from Red Green. He used to say that he'd stand there and watch the snowplow driver go by, and the snowplow driver would wave with one hand, and Red Green would wave back with one finger. And that is an absolute thing that, yeah. So again, it sucks, but parking at the end of your driveway, at least the only thing you got to contend with is that big ass hump of snow that the snowplow dumped in there. And ours is bad too. We got these really big, like industrial snow blowers that go on the front of a tractor, and they run down the middle of the road, and they make piles, like, again, windrows that then they come by and pick up with dump trucks afterwards. But it can be pretty deadly and dangerous if you're not careful. Bugging in's more comfortable. I figured we'd play this kind of, positives and negatives, both attributes of it, because honestly, it's more comfortable. Who doesn't want to be able to stay at home in an emergency if you can? I mean, the worst thing that a feller would have, I'd hate for this to even happen, but if you had to bug out an emergency, had no plan, and go to a Red Cross or FEMA shelter or something like that, to me, there would be nothing more uncomfortable than having to live around a whole bunch of other people that you don't know. So, I mean, being able to bug in if you're set and you're, prepared in your everyday life, way more comfortable. And yes, this so cliche, but it's so true. The Dorothy thing from Wizard of Oz, but there's no place like home. I mean, again, in an emergency, any outside variable, anything that, any change is going to make you that much more anxious and that much more uncomfortable. So if you can, stay at home. Bugging in, again, less surprises as well, because hopefully you're familiar with all the systems of your home. So if something breaks down, you know how to fix it, or at least you have, an alternative option there to fix. You know where the food is. You know where your backup power is. You know where your water is. You know who your neighbors are. You know how the house acts in a bad storm. All of that kind of stuff. So, way less surprises when you're bugging in. And if you guys, and then of course we have Ken, who's the crazy guy who lives out in the woods. So he's already bugged out. So I don't know what you would do, Ken, if you literally had to bug out. Would you go further into the woods, or would you go to town? But yes, I mean, so in most instances, being out in the woods, you're probably already set. And that's your form of bugging in at that point, because you're already home. But, and if you're not, if the, the people are listening on the podcast or across the other platforms, if you're not kind of getting the hint at this point, bugging in is almost always the better option for so many reasons. Like I said, less surprises, it's more comfortable, less planning. It's the right decision the majority of the time. It's just so damn easy. So, I used to have an operator in the oil patch, and he said, if you want to know the easiest way to do something, hire a lazy man to do it, because he is going to show you what the easiest way to do something is. And why not? I mean, sometimes we always have this idea that the only right answer has to be difficult or take a lot of work or cause us, grief or stress. But geez, like, bugging in is almost always the best option because it's better for your family and it's a hell of a lot easier than packing everything up and heading out on the road. But what that says is that bugging out is going to be a hard decision because, like I said, 95% of the time you're going to want to stay home, or the right decision is going to be staying home. And when you finally think about it, if I'm going to bug out, I got to be serious about this. And if you're like me, you're probably going to sit there and fret. And I can make a decision when I absolutely have to, but the big end of it is I want to debate it. You know, I always want to second guess myself. And so to me, bugging out needs to be, number one, the last resort. And so if it's really the only option in certain bad scenarios, for us, one of those would be a wildfire, or more specifically, the wildfire smoke here. We don't get a lot of wildfires right in our area, but at times the smoke could be bad enough that, yeah, you know what? That is absolutely a drop dead simple decision to make. We're getting the hell out of Dodge. Chemical spill, we have the trains going through here with all kinds of petrochemicals all the time. You know, is that something that I worry about on a daily basis? No. But is it one of those things that I plan for, 5 or 6 contingencies down the road that I might think about once in a while and have a plan on paper just because? Sure it is. I don't lose any sleep over it, but it is a less than, it is one of those situations where a person, it could happen. The chances of it happening, pretty slim, but you do need to at least think about it. A tornado or a serious hurricane, those are the type of things sometimes that it is the better option to get out of Dodge. If you have a warning on hurricanes, a lot of times, tornadoes, you can head in an opposite direction, or, you might want to bug in if you have a really good tornado shelter. And I got to say, I'm not one who has a lot of experience with tornadoes. We do have them occasionally here, but they tend to not really be, I don't want to say the deadly variety, but, not the ones that a lot of, my friends and compatriots down in the States have to deal with. So, but, that could be an instance where you're like, all right, time to go. And so the opposite, of course, bugging out is going to take a lot of work. I mean, you got to find a place to go. It's going to be a drive here, anywhere in any one of my plans where we would need to bug out, you're looking at a minimum of a 3-hour drive in any direction. So, and that's a 3-hour drive with a family who's upset, with kids who, don't have their Xbox. We can talk railroads. Well, that was a good one, Tim. I'd love to, Tom. That would be great. Yeah, we just have the one here that the Trans-Canada Railroad is an hour north of us as well. But there are, and it seems to be, I don't want to sound like a doom and gloom guy, but it really does. At least a couple of years ago, we seem to have a whole bunch of spills and derailments, and it happens. Like just recently, near where my brother-in-law, where his family farm is, guy went across the railroad tracks with a tractor on, grabbed a hold of the train tracks and hauled them up. Never even stopped, just kept going like there was no tomorrow. They ended up reporting it to the CN Rail, and they came along and fixed it before a train came. But if nobody had caught that, who knows what could have happened? I mean, it's something just that simple. And you know what? To be honest, the farmer may not have even known that he did it. But thank God somebody come along, caught it, and was able to call the maintenance guys and get it fixed up before, something a whole hell of a lot worse could have happened. But yeah, like I said, bugging out, it's going to take a hell of a lot more work. You got to find a place to go, and then you got to figure out what exactly you're going to take with you. So, okay, you might have stuff pre-stacked in Rubbermaid totes or, go bags or whatever. But again, you probably have a pretty short window of time to leave, and you're going to be hauling ass to get everything thrown in the truck or the car or the, maybe you got, if you're lucky, a pull behind utility trailer, whatever it happens to be. But, another one is money. Bugging out is going to cost you more because first off, you've already got all your expenses at home. So, I mean, if hopefully this is just something you're going away for a day or two, but you got all your bills at home, and now you're going to add maybe a hotel bill, restaurant bills, maybe not. Just simply spending the gas to get somewhere. And then the time, all of that's an added expense in getting out of Dodge. Now, I'm not saying it isn't, but I'm just saying that's another thing that you got to think about when it may or may not be time to leave town, leave home, and go somewhere else. Bugging out is going to take a lot of planning, and I'm going to touch on the plans that that I've kind of put together for my wife and family here a little bit later on. But you need to have an evacuation plan in on paper, electronic, whatever it happens to be. But the planning needs to happen for sure. You're going to need to coordinate with other family members. So, for instance, okay, if everybody in your family knows, Tim's the crazy prepper, or we know that if the power's out for an extended period of time, we can all go to Tim and Becky's house and be happy, healthy, and warm for a good length of time. Great. Everybody knows to go there. However, what happens if it's an emergency and there's a chemical spill, an hour west of here and the wind's blowing it this way and we all need to leave in a hurry? What about the rest of the family? How are we all going to meet up? What if our adult kids are in a different vehicle? You need to have all those contingencies thought out, put on paper, and then shared with everyone else. Absolutely. And Tom says, I'm looking forward to it. Yeah, me too. That would be cool. I'm sure I could learn a ton because where I grew up, as far as railroads go, they were hauled up when I was 5 years old. There's no rail on my end of Nova Scotia where I grew up at all anymore. So coming out here, I'm still like a kid every time the train goes by, at least most times. But and bugging out's going to be uncomfortable. You're not going to be at home. You're not going to be sleeping in your own bed. If you end up needing to go, heaven help you, to a shelter, you're going to be sleeping around a whole bunch of other people that you're not going to be happy with. Your schedule's going to be all out of whack. So somebody's going to be, there's nothing worse. Number one, being in a routine is good for kids. It's good for adults. It's good for just about anybody. And if you end up bugging out, of course, everything's going to be out of whack. And then you're going to add to that the stress of not knowing what's going on at home. So you're going to end up, I remember one time, the house next door to where I grew up blew up. Long story. But anyway, the husband and wife, they had their disagreements and it did not end well. So we ended up getting a phone call. I was at a small little church doing a puppet show when I was just a little kid. And they called the church, and in the middle of the service, which never happened, cell phones weren't a thing back in, the dark ages. And they said, hey, the house next door to you blew up. And of course, my grandmother's house was on the next side of me and she had propane, and we figured, oh my goodness. And you know what? The worst part of it was the not knowing. We knew something had happened, but we didn't know what happened. And as we were driving to town, I remember seeing, and I was actually relieved when I saw the flames and I thought it was our house that burnt, because at least we knew there was nobody in there. Then we got closer and realized it was our neighbors, and it still sucked, but at least it wasn't somebody we were close to. And the whole idea of, being uncomfortable due to the stress of not knowing what's coming or what might be happening, or because your brain, it's always your brain that runs away from you and causes you to end up just being stressed out, and you're like, oh, I don't know what to do, and this is the worst case scenario, and all of that. And of course, again, if you're in, there's no place like home, because when you're at home, your brain's going to allow you to calm down just a little bit more. And of course, all of this, this is all just the basics, and I'm only touching the absolute basics of it. And again, you're going to add all that, and then you're going to be cramped into a smaller space. If you were smart and you booked yourself a hotel a few hours out of town, great, you're going to be comfortable. But the fact remains that you're still going to have you and your animals and your family all cramped into, say, a one-room hotel room. And the weather's probably still inclement, so you're not going to want to get out and do a whole lot. But when it comes down to it, you're going to have a lot of stressed out people cramped into a small, not normal, out of the ordinary kind of place, and people might get a little short with each other. So all of that is just going to make, bugging out obviously not ideal. Sometimes it's the only solution, but just remember, it's not all, it's not all it's cracked up to be in all those prepper porn novels, for sure. But so when it comes to prepping and bugging out or bugging in, I have a rule that I rarely break. But when I say rarely, that means I do break it sometimes. But it's simply that whenever I buy something, a prepper gadget or something that I know will help the family in a preparedness situation, it's got to make my life better, and it has to be something that I can use on a day-to-day basis. So it really needs to have a couple of uses. It needs to be something we use regularly, but it also needs to be, or it doesn't, if it's going to be a prepper gadget or something, it needs to be something I can use on a regular basis. Like my Berkey water filter, for instance, we use that every single day. as long as I don't accidentally leave the handle open just a little bit like I did last night and woke up and had 2.25 gallons of water all over the floor. But so we use that every day. We drink our water out of it, but it's also there if we ever had our water contaminated, and it'll allow us to filter all of that junk out of there. My neck knife, I use it for opening Amazon packages, but I also have it around my neck just in case we walk through one of them not so nice areas of the city. Won't say what for, but at least a person has it, right? So I say these things to say there's ways that you can make bugging out more comfortable and maybe less expensive. For instance, using things that you already have on hand, and I'm sure Brian will like this one, but an RV, for instance, it's a built-in vacation vehicle right off. And by its very definition, it's basically self-sufficient. So you've got a vehicle, probably like mine right now is just sitting 5 feet out my kitchen window. And it's basically a self-sufficient with heating, cooling, ability to cook, ability to store water, ability to store food. It's basically a self-sufficient vehicle. It's a self-sufficient bug out vehicle that you already have. Now, if I said you need to go out and buy a $3,000 or $4,000 bug out vehicle and equip it with everything you need to take off and use on a moment's notice in case there's a bad emergency, and that's the only use you're going to have for it, well then, that might seem like a waste of money, because it really would be. But in this instance, if you're somebody who's into camping and you like to, do the whole RV life and that sort of thing, just takes a couple. Exactly. So that was, I think Brian gets into my notes and reads them and knows what I'm going to say. But basically, this is what exactly with a few not so obvious upgrades, you can use it as a bug out home away from home. So there's really just a couple little things. Well, you can do a lot of things, but if you wanted to add solar to it or a few different things that other people aren't even going to notice, you've got yourself an awesome vacation mobile plus a souped up, off the grid, self-sufficient bug out vehicle. And so there you are. There's something that you can invest in that makes your life better on a regular basis and allows you to take that vehicle maybe to a Walmart parking lot 4 or 5 hours south of you or north of you, or whichever direction works for you, and hang out and be there. And it's also going to be somewhat comfortable because it's something that your family's maybe used to, unless you're like us and you spend like 3 nights over 3 years in it, which, we probably should use it a little bit more. And then, of course, Ken will like this one, but there's the cabin in the woods as well. Now don't take offense to this, Ken, at all, but you could go and buy a cabin in the woods so far off the grid that you need to take a floater plane to get there. And if that's what you're into, great. But another option would be, if you're financially able to do it, is buy yourself a vacation property like a cabin or something on a lake somewhere that would be a really good place that you can go within a few hours drive on a weekend for your family to relax. So it's something you're going to use. It's something you might build equity in, but it's also completely a bug out property. And it could be something that you add wind to, you add solar to, you could stock up with non-perishables, all of the normal stuff that's going to be in a cabin that'll make your life better, even if you're just there for a weekend away. But it's also there just in case. And we're not talking about the end of the world kind of situations here. We're just talking about when you might need to leave home, and you never know. I mean, it can be something simple, and we'll talk about some of those things. But and then another thing you can do to make your life just a little bit easier when you're bugging out, of course, is stake out some stake out some hotels ahead of time and make it a vacation. So even if you end up saying, okay, honey, whatever happened, we pulled the trigger, we're bugging out, we got to go somewhere. Okay, so for us, 2.5 hours or almost 3 hours south of here, kind of southeast is a city. I use that term loosely. And we're going to go there and we're going to stay at the, Quality Inn, and it has a hot tub and it has a water slide, and we're going to make a weekend out of it. And we're going to try to take as much of the stress away as we can. And of course, having that in the finances is going to make things a lot easier as well. And worst case, you get down there and say the storm blows by and nothing happens. Well, you know what? You had a good weekend away from away with the family, and you're able to enjoy yourself, and no harm, no foul. But you made the right decision because one of those triggers happened, and it was time that you need to get up and get going. So how do you plan for a bug out situation? Well, I guess for us here, and it was actually kind of cool because I made a list a few years ago on my phone of the disasters that I thought, and and it could be a personal disaster or or it could be a very localized disaster or more of a regional or even a national thing. But I picked the things that I thought had the biggest chance to affect us, had the biggest chance of actually happening. And then I kind of formulated the plan around each of those quote unquote disasters. And, after talking to a few other people about some of them I realized, what, really isn't, one of the big ones I had on my list, and I won't, or whatever, was a tornado at the time. And, are the chances of one happening here? Yes. But the chances of one happening in my area of a strength that could be of a serious consequence to us is very, very negligible. I mean, to look back on how many tornadoes we've had that were actually caused any real destruction was just a few. Hey, Minuteman, that's okay. There's always the replay. Nice to see you, though. But yes, so I made a list of the disasters that are most likely to happen. And in my research for this video, I typed that in to my local town. And what was really cool? I was really impressed. My local town website had a list of disasters that have the opportunity of happening in my town, and basically things that the town is somewhat prepared for, and they're encouraging other people to be prepared for. So I thought I'd run you through my process a little bit, and maybe it'll help, especially if there's some newbies out there, because I know a lot of us have heard this before. And what I like about it is when you're talking about something like this, I'll listen, I'll have a podcast on in the background, and somebody might be giving me a list of 10 things, and I've heard 9 of them before, and I might even have heard the 10th one, but I never really heard it in that way. And when I hear it, all of a sudden it clicks and something just goes on the, in the right direction in the brain, and it crosses some synapse, and all of a sudden I got this great idea that I'm going to run with. And then I tell my wife, I've got this crazy idea and we're going to, do this or do that. But yeah. So for me, in my area, the biggest chances of disaster, wildfire, or like I said before, really wildfire smoke is a big thing in my area. And if it got bad enough, that is absolutely a trigger for bugging out. Now, another one is a train derailment. The chances of it happening are slim, but it absolutely could. Some kind of nasty ass chemical, derailment, kind of fire. And our local fire department is trained for all that because we're in the height of the oil patch here, and a lot of the guys, but it's still, we might have to leave on short notice, and that is absolutely a bug out. Now, one that I should have thought of, but I didn't, and this was on the town's website, and I was really impressed, of course, was extreme cold. And for us, most times bugging in is going to be the option, because you're just going to want to stay in, keep your doors closed, obviously keep your friggin' windows closed, but just keep your heat on and up, and keep an eye on your systems. Make sure your pipes don't freeze, so you're going to be as comfortable as you can be. But in an extreme cold situation, that's going to be a bug in for us. Again, a big thunderstorm, hailstorm, that's going to be a bug in as well. Just get all your stuff in your backyard put away so it can't go through a window and, wreck a vehicle, or heaven help you, hurt your neighbor or something. And here's another one. In my area, about 45 minutes away, we have the largest oil tank farm in Canada. So the largest storage facility of petroleum products in Canada. Now, the chances of something happening there are very slim, but when we first moved here, we'd only lived here about 6 months at the time. There was a fire that took place there, and everybody was just a little bit on edge. It turned out to not be anything, but that would be a really, really bad situation, because the prevailing winds would bring whatever junk and debris there is right toward us. So it's something to, just consider. And again, I don't lose any sleep over it, but I do have a plan just in case something like that ever did happen. It would be good because I want to make sure my family and, extended family are hopefully taken care of. And real quick, Ken says our nearest neighbor is a little over 5 miles away. We can't see another building from the highest point on our place. Float plane ride would make it ideal. Yeah, so I guess so. We can put Brian from the Lots Project. He's bugging in and bugging out at the same time, and maybe we can say that about Ken as well. He's already bugged out, and where he is, he can bug in or bug out, and he's happy right there. So I like that. I guess why not be able to design your life around the ability to be both bugged in and bugged out at the same time, because then you're over prepared or double prepared. I like that. So, so anyway, each of these scenarios, and this for anybody who's, kind of thinking, okay, well, you said bugging in is the plan 95% of the time. Yes, but the real planning has to go in for that 5% of the time that you might need to bug out. So for me, each of those scenarios that I listed that would be a bug out scenario, first thing I did was look at where that disaster might be centered, and then what direction ideally I would head. And in most instances for us, straight south is the best option, because from where I live, if I head west, I'm going to be heading into whatever's blowing toward me. If I head east, I'm just trying to outrun it, and I'm just buying myself some time. And if I head north, I'm going to end up at Santa's workshop. So for me, the best scenario in almost every instance is to head some sort of direction, south, straight south, southeast, or southwest in that instance. So yes, to the US, absolutely. I've got about, 6 hours till I hit the border. So we're good. I can go down to Medicine Hat, or I can go to Kindersley, Saskatchewan, or, I can go down to Regina, Saskatchewan. So there's some areas I can go down to Calgary, that kind of stuff. So, I definitely, going straight west for us or straight east would be a bad idea. And like I said, going north would be really bad. A few years ago, kind of the last Albertan city when heading north is Fort McMurray, and it's an oil town. My cousin lives up there. And if you guys, I don't know if you saw those huge wildfires they had, but there's really only one, and this is a little bit scary to me, but there's only one road, period, not even one main road. There's only one road in and one road out, and it is north and south. Chris says he knows a guy who come see. Absolutely. Yes, that is the best situation. Knowing people, having community, having other places, having a friend that you can say, hey, can I come and park my damn RV in your parking lot? Or in your backyard for a few days, because things are a little hairy up here and I need to go somewhere. So, we joke, but absolutely community, real in person. Imaginary internet friends are great too, but eventually we got to meet up in person. But anyway, so back to the kind of Fort McMurray thing, and heading north, literally there's just one road out, and they were scared the entire city was going to burn. And so there's some really harrowing footage there of people heading south on that highway and passing through smoke-filled highways and literal fire right on the sides of the road. It was scary. So to me, living somewhere where I have 4 options to go, of course, south for me is probably the best option. But, again, and another thing I learned on the prairies when I first moved here is there's no such thing as a shortcut. When everything's on 1 mile square grids, there's no shortcuts. On the East Coast, everybody had a shortcut. Everybody knew this road through the woods went this way and that way, and you'd save yourself time. So here, it's all about just planning your most efficient way to get somewhere and then knowing where you want to go. So again, Ken says 100%, absolutely. And having number one, having the main route that you want to head, and then having at least one alternative route. So, like I said, for instance, in most cases, I'm going to be heading south. And if I head and my geography might be off a little bit, but if I head really almost straight south, I'll be in Medicine Hat. And if I head kind of southeast, just a little ways, I'll end up in Kindersley. And if I go a little bit further over, I'll end up in Regina. So having, 3 routes that you can head out of town is better. And then, of course, and I'm sure you guys have heard this many times from teachers who are way better than me, but having hotels ahead of time, looked up, having them saved in your phone, and maybe even going down and staying at 1 or 2 at a time. And, my wife's really good at booking a hotel just in case. We have Expedia, and there's other different online, apps or websites you can use to book hotels. But if we even think that we're going to need to stay somewhere, my wife is awesome. She's on there and she finds us the best hotel for the cheapest price, just like that. And that's the same instance. Even if you think you just might need to bug out. If there's a 20% chance you might need to bug out, it is literally nothing to go on and use an app like Expedia, book yourself a hotel just like that, because you might be fighting against a whole bunch of other people. And if you're the first person to think about it, then you are on the ball. And even if you get caught with a 10% cancellation fee, at least you went ahead and did exactly what you needed to do and booked yourself, a comfortable place for your family to bug out to. But yeah, that to me, that's absolutely. Now, here's the other thing. And part of being ready, we keep a small bug out bag, or I call it a vehicle preparedness bag, in obviously the back seat of our truck. So we try to have, the absolute bare minimums that we could get by. If we get stuck in the city and need to stay at a hotel, we have that in the vehicle. So having all those bags in your vehicle and ready to go, that's going to make bugging out just a little bit easier. So that's part of having the plan, and that's more for that situation where, the emergency responders knock on your door and say, you got 30 seconds to get the hell out of here because something bad's coming. You need to have just that bag. Now, also have a plan in place. If honey, we need to leave in an hour, there's a good chance there's going to be a storm here, or we have a half an hour to clear out. Have yourself a plan. And this, I'm going to be absolutely transparent here. This is probably the area that I've struggled with or haven't dealt with as much as I probably should, but having a plan and practicing it. So knowing what exactly you would grab if you had a half an hour to pack up and get out of here. Are you going to hook up to the RV and take the RV? Are you going to, what are you going to take? You're going to take some backup heat. You're going to take some extra food. Of course, you're going to take your animals. How are you going to catch them all? Because they're little idiots, that kind of stuff. So all of that, right? And that leads me into my next point. And have a plan ahead of time for your fur babies. In some instances, no problem at all. But make sure you're going to have food for them, because, if things are in a bad situation, you might not be able to pick up food somewhere for them, ahead of time. And so much of this is being prepared ahead of time. So, find yourself some hotels that are dog or cat friendly. Take your cat or your dog or your dogs on a few trips ahead of time to acclimatize them to their vehicle, because our little Hazel, every time we took her for the longest time, would puke in the vehicle. And my wife was so proud because she took her recently and she didn't. So getting your animals used to traveling with you, getting your animals used to being in little soft-sided kennels, will take a lot of the stress out of needing to bug out for your family and, of course, for your pets, which to me is an absolute godsend. And get them used to being on leashes. So on top of, having the food on hand, also make sure you have all the carrying supplies that you need for those animals as well. So, a lot of people might say, okay, well, how do I know when to bug out? And we've been talking about it. Yeah, Charlotte says, poor Hazel, ain't that the truth? But the best time to make the decision to bug out was 6 months ago. And you might say, Tim, that's got to be the dumbest statement I've ever heard. And what I mean by that is figuring out exactly what it is, what the triggers are going to be that cause you to have to bug out. So ahead of time, say, okay, honey, these are the different scenarios that we are in two totally different worlds when it comes to dogs. Ain't that the truth, Brian? I've told Brian before that stuff that comes out of the rear end of his dog is bigger than my entire dogs put together, I think. But so yes. All right. So the absolute best time to figure out you need to bug out was 6 months ago. And what I mean by that is making a plan, knowing the scenarios that you will need to bug out, and knowing the threat level that you need to bug out at. So if you've made all those decisions ahead of time and you've practiced that and mentally you've run through those gymnastics, when it comes down to time that you absolutely need to bug out, you're going to be able to make that decision just like that. And you're going to know. So instead of sitting around and fretting and, twiddling your thumbs and thinking, is it time? Is it time? Should we go? Should we go? Have those decisions made ahead of time, have a plan in place, and the rest of it is really going to fall into place for you. And again, like I kind of kid a little bit here, but the whole idea of bugging out, and like we've talked, is we're not talking about a Red Dawn scenario where, somebody who spent their last 10 years learning bushcraft is going to go off in the woods and learn, and live without anything, because that, I don't want to come across as mean or anything. But if somebody's into bushcraft and that kind of stuff, awesome. It's a great hobby, but that is the 1% of the 1% of the 1% of situations where, and if we're all in trouble. My dogs will probably eat me at that point, but it's an option for some people, I suppose, but to me, it absolutely isn't what we're looking to do. We're looking at, when I say bugging out, is trying to be as comfortable as we can as a family, away from home, and keeping ourselves as safe as we possibly can. But like I said, don't make the decision in the spur of the moment, but make the decision in the spur of the moment. So you need to be able to make that decision just like that, but you're going to base it on all of the practice and experience that you've put in leading up to whatever this bad scenario might be, you know? If you've never considered the need to leave at home, if you've never thought about it, if you've never run yourself through all of those kind of scenarios, and I don't want to come across as, a negative or an end of the world kind of guy who sits around and just thinks about bad situations all the time. But for me, running through that mental gymnastics actually gives me peace. It actually makes me think, okay, well, I can handle this. I don't need to worry about it. I don't have to sit down and fret about it. And if you've done all that, when a bad situation in the rare instance actually comes up, you're not going to be completely overwhelmed with the stress because you've taken the time to plan and put a plan into practice, put it on paper, share it with your family, and then you can say, okay, guess what? It is time, honey, we're bugging out. And it's going to take a ton of that stress, and the likelihood of making the wrong decision goes way down because you've practiced and planned for sure. But have a standard in place for bugging out. You need to know what is required for you to leave home. So like I said, it could be an awful chemical spill at a tank farm. It could be a derailment of a train. It could be to the point where the wildfire smoke is getting so bad that my daughter with asthma isn't going to be able to stand it. So we need to leave, And then again, this was kind of an area that we've struggled in, not completely, but when you have that plan, discuss it with your family, discuss it with your significant other, and discuss it like with us. We've got 3 adult kids who all live in our town but don't live at home. And there's a good chance we're not going to be together when something like that happens. So make sure they're in on the plan too. At least if you want them to come along with you, make sure they are for sure. But you need to know what the standard for leaving home is. I guess a good rule of thumb to go by is that your chances of being safe are higher if you leave than if you stay. So that, for us, that would be absolutely one of the cardinal rules of when to bug out. Is if I look at this scenario and I say, okay, guess what? There's a fire at the Hardesty tank farm, and I wish it wouldn't happen, and hopefully it doesn't, and hopefully it never, ever does. But if I'm sitting here and I know, hey, we got fumes and gross shit coming toward us, you know what? The prudent decision for us is to head south and spend a weekend at a hotel. And if we get down there and if nothing happens and we come home, all the better. But if staying safe, if the odds of staying safe are better by leaving, that's when you bug out. That's one of them for sure. So a few questions to kind of ask yourself or talk about. But again, is it dangerous? But what's the duration of the disaster going to be? If it's a thunderstorm that's going to probably last an hour or two, you might as well stick around. If it's a wildfire that looks like, it's blowing through, sorry, not a wildfire, but if it's wildfire smoke that's going to blow through in an hour or two, you can probably bug in. But if it looks like it's a slow moving kind of, there's going to be smoke for a long time, then yeah, you probably need to head out. So, that's definitely one of those to look at for sure. And again, also look at the chance of disaster. So if there's just, if it's just a really small chance of something happening, but that thing that could happen could be really, really horrible, then maybe it's not a bad idea to just head out for the evening and spend time with the kids and go to a hotel and just relax just a little bit, And remember this too. And again, it's not something that we talk about to be negative. It's something to me that empowers us as preparedness people. Man, there's been a lot of P's tonight, but is putting this plan into place. And remember, if you go, you're not going to hurt anything by going. If you head out on the road to keep your family safe, and all of a sudden you get the call and say, hey, whatever the scenario was is gone. It's not a threat anymore. And you turn around and you go back, you didn't hurt anything. So it never, ever hurts to err on the side of caution. And again, like I said, bugging in is probably the right decision 95% of the time. And that's what's going to make that 5% of the time such a difficult decision for you as, the decision maker, or one of the higher ups in your family. Is when that 5% decision has to be made, plan ahead of time, figure out what your cutoff is for having to go, and then go with it. Once you've made that decision, just live with that decision, because by going somewhere else, it's not going to be any worse. You can always come back. And, the idea of being a prepared person is either making your life better, or at least protecting your life from getting any worse. And if you end up heading out of town and spending a good night at a hotel, well, you know what? If nothing happened, nothing got worse. Nothing at all. You just spent a little money and had a good time. But if there was a bad scenario, you did your job and you kept your family safe. I was thinking, and you guys remember back to March of 2020 when all the craziness started. We call it craziness, don't we? Anyway, I remember being in Home Depot. My wife and I were out of town. It was an hour away, and I'd been keeping an eye on everything that was happening at that time anyway, but it was just kind of in the background bouncing around. And I seen another social media post, and then I read a story on the news, and everything just clicked. And all of a sudden I decided it was time for us to plan to bug in. And that didn't mean leaving, but it meant being as self-sufficient as we could be. And to be honest, we were in a pretty good situation at that time anyway. But I flicked the switch and we decided, hey, we need to stock up on a few things. We already had everything we needed, but it was just time to look over everything we had and what areas could we just prop up a little bit. So we picked up a little more over-the-counter medicine. I picked up another box of N95 masks, and we made our mind up, and the missus and I just went forward with it, and we dealt with it. And you know what? It may have turned out to not be nearly as bad as it absolutely could have been. And because of that, we were prepped up anyway, and we had things on hand, and we bugged in properly, and we were okay. If it had been worse, we were already prepared for that as well. So once you make that decision, live with the decision of bugging out and go with it, and be absolutely what's the proper word for it here? Be confident in the fact that you've made the right decision, and then embrace that decision and go. And don't be scared, and no second thoughts, and absolutely just deal with it from there on out. But like I said, remember, everything we do as preparedness-minded folk should be designed to make our life better, or at the very least, keep it from getting worse. And Charlotte, Charlotte said, what was that message I sent? I didn't mean to send one. That's okay. But yeah, so, everything should be designed to either make our life better or keep our life from, getting in a worse case scenario. And when that comes down to it, that's the whole idea of bugging in versus bugging out. And, if you're new to the preparedness field, or if you're just getting started and you might feel overwhelmed and you might think, my God, Tim, I don't have a plan for anything. Well, you know what? It's okay. None of us did. A lot of us still don't. But the whole idea around bugging in versus bugging out falls under that whole concept of either making sure our families, making sure our life is better because we're prepared, or at least it doesn't get any worse. Because, if you stayed in your situation and the house flooded and it was really bad, like Hurricane Katrina, and some people got left behind, that is not a good situation. So by bugging out, you've at least saved yourself and your family from a really bad time. And by, keeping extra food on hand, by having backup stores of fuel and ways to heat your home, and having a plan, you've actually made your life better. And that's exactly why we all prepare. It's not because we're doom and gloom and we're absolutely, we don't know, none of us ever want to see bad things happen, but we're also realists, and we know that sometimes bad things do happen, and frig, we might as well be prepared for them, because if we're not, we could be like all of those, all of those little bugs running away from a hurricane in 100 different directions, just trying to get out of Dodge and not having a plan. So, prepare, plan, and then either bug in or bug out. So guys, I hope you enjoyed that. Was, holler and fire tonight. It was a good, I love this. I love our Sunday night live streams. I don't know if you guys, if you want to share your plans or just anything, questions about that kind of stuff, send them along to me. And I'd love to do, some more in-depth follow-up episodes on this whole concept. Or, if you're listening to this on the podcast, or you happen to be catching it on the replay, feel free to, you can email me or message me, or, I love this whole concept. And, this was just kind of the high steps of bugging in and bugging out, just kind of hit the points of it. But to me, this is exactly where it starts. Hey, Ronald, how are you? Ronald Cole Jr. Thank you very much, sir. I very much appreciate it. So yeah, anyway, guys, two quick things before I finish up tonight. I hit an hour right on, and it was a fire live stream. So I was happy with it. But honestly, the biggest thing is if you guys are around Thursday night, drop by for the live stream. I am wicked excited because it's going to be I just have this whole idea of, I've got about 15 to 20 episodes of this preparedness thing where I'm going to deal with the systems of the home and how we can repair them on our own when help isn't around the corner, and what to keep on hand, because us as preppers, we love to have lots of stuff on hand. Thanks, Brian. Have a good night, buddy. Brian's got to get up early, guaranteed. But yes, if you guys are around, please take a minute, drop by Thursday night and support me. And we're going to have the input from the Prepper Broadcast Network community as well. And so, yeah, and thank you guys. And if you're listening on the podcast and you're still listening, thanks. The audio end of this is growing like crazy. And if anybody out there can do me a favor and just share the podcast, because I would love to grow this audience. It's growing like crazy already, and I am so passionate and I love doing this. But if you guys, the best way to grow this audience is if you get value out of it, take a minute and share it on social for me, guys. Anyway, that's it for me this week. Thanks for hanging out with me in the workshop. And as always, guys, stay happy, stay healthy, and have a great week.